Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Ravencast for May 11th, 2017. I am Adam Erickson, and the Ravencast is part of the Raven Review, an online magazine where we write and talk about mimetic theory and the rivalry, violence, and scapegoating that so often divides our community. And today, I'm especially excited because I have with me the other members of the flock, Lindsay and Suzanne. How are you today?
Great. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing just fine. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, I'm doing great too.
Good. I'm so glad. Although I am bummed, Suzanne, that we cannot see your face.
Oh, that's okay. I just came from yoga, so a little sweaty look. Maybe it's better you don't see it.
Okay. Sounds good. All we get to see of Suzanne is a video feed that's interrupted. So please stand by. And we've been standing by for quite a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those of you who have been waiting.
Yes. Thank you to our live audience who have been waiting for us to try to figure this out, but we can't. So if you are watching this on YouTube, I've superimposed an image of Suzanne on there. So that's nice. Suzanne, your image looks very nice. Not
thank
sweaty
you.
from yoga. So
Good.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to talk with Lindsay and Suzanne today because Mother's Day is this Sunday. And you are both two of my favorite mothers. So thank you for being on.
Thank you, Adam.
And I'm also really interested to talk with you about some of your experiences as being mothers and also the background of Mother's Day and what this mimetic theory thing has to say about mothers and children and power struggles and fathers, because I'm a father. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. But our motto at the Raven Review is change your view, change the world. So if you like to hear new perspectives on religion and politics, pop culture, and current events, perspectives that seek to bridge divides and bring people together, then please go subscribe to the Raven Review at ravenfoundation.org. So today, we're going to talk all about Mother's Day. And I'm just kind of wondering, what are your personal reflections on Mother's Day? Do you have any personal reflections on Mother's Day? Just general reflections?
What came to mind was a childhood memory. When I was young, I was raised Roman Catholic, and the entire month of May was a celebration of Mary, the Divine Mother, and the maternal presence that's up in heaven, seated at the right hand of her Son. And what we did during the month of May in my house, and also in our school, and other families did this too, was we had this statue of Mary. In fact, I have it around here somewhere. I do. It's behind me, but you can't see it. Anyway, it's a beautiful statue of Mary with her arms extended out by her side. And what we would do would put flowers all around. And every day I would go out. We had a beautiful field behind our house. And I would pick, of course, dandelions, and black-eyed Susans and pussy willows and lilacs and beautiful flowers. And we would make crowns for Mary, and we would put the flowers around the base of the statue. And it was something that my mother really enjoyed too. I really gave her pleasure that we were doing this. And so it just went on all month, and it was just a beautiful celebration of motherhood and spring and the maternal divine presence. So that's kind of, you know, how childhood memories just sort of govern your life, you know. Yeah. So that's one that's been in my heart since I've been a kid.
I often wonder how much pressure would that be to be the mother of the Son of God?
Oh boy. Well, you know, sadly, we all feel that pressure because we think our children are the most important child. Each child that's born is indeed the most important child that's ever been born. And so we all feel that pressure to be the best we can be. Don't we, Lindsay?
Absolutely. And we're all of us who are mothers or fathers or caregivers, we are all what we are unto the living image of God, because all of humanity is the living image of God. So we do have that kind of responsibility.
You mothers are so good, because there are times when I just want to go ancient old school sacrifice on my boy, especially my first one last night. So, I mean, there are times when I'm just like, just want to, do not so good things in these power struggles with my children. And that we're going to get to that in a little bit. So, but I am very impressed by how you talk about motherhood and the love that you have for your children. I love my children, of course. And I would never go ancient old school sacrifice on them. But
no, don't. I love your children too.
Good. So Lindsay, any thoughts come to your mind about motherhood?
Well, I was gonna save my thoughts for my own mother for the end. And Mom, you are the one I think of first on Mother's Day. So,
yes.
But Suzanne, since you talked about Mary, that opens the door for me to mention that for the last well over a decade, maybe 15 years or so, when I think of Mother's Day, I think of Julian of Norwich and Jesus as a maternal image of the Trinity. And I feel so blessed by Mother Julian's insight to Mother Christ. Christ is the one who painfully bore a new humanity on the cross. I think that's just a beautiful image. I should have brought my Julian of Norwich book so I could read some of it, but that would take too much time. But the idea of Christ as a maternal figure, bearing a new humanity and nurturing us with wisdom and with new life, that's some of the religious significance I think of on Mother's Day.
I have a book called Jesus as Mother, which goes through this medieval tradition that like none of us hear about as of Jesus on the cross. And they looked specifically to the moment where Jesus, the water pours out of him and the blood pours out of him as imagery of Jesus giving birth to this new way of being human. It's beautiful. It's very profound. You also have, what is it? The Sophia, the knowledge of God, right? The spirit of God. These are all feminine imagery of God that is the Holy Spirit, right? So there is this female imagery that flows throughout the biblical narrative and Christian tradition that is our mother of God. It's fantastic. I love it. Beautiful stuff.
So let's set that more in the church.
We do. Yeah. What do we gain from stressing that more in the church, Lindsay, do you think?
I mean, just women feeling more at home in the church. I mean, off the top of my head, I feel like that's a humongous gain. You know, for half of humanity to feel represented, not just in biblical figures, but in the Godhead itself, especially when tradition has denied them that for so long. And when I say tradition, you know, I mean patriarchal tradition, but we've been talking about how that's not exactly how the early church worked. The early church did honor women, and I think we've always had to struggle with patriarchy, but I think that the whole Christian tradition is one of struggle with the status quo and with the struggle between the status quo and what people assume, which is probably more inclined to a masculine portrayal of God. The church has always struggled with between that and, what Jesus taught us about God, which is that God is love, and love must encompass, it must encompass the feminine, it must encompass everything. And some churches do a great job of it, but the church in general needs to really emphasize that more, I think.
Yeah. Suzanne, you started talking about Mary from your Catholic childhood. And I've always wondered, what do you think that Protestants have to gain from reclaiming Mary?
Well, to me, wow.
Because Protestants often, I think, in kind of a reverse imitation or a negative imitation of Catholicism, is just kind of maybe not rejected Mary, but just kind of sees her as a vehicle to get to Jesus.
Well, and frankly, I think that's what you lose. You lose a intercessor, and you lose this sense that though Jesus is the King, he has an obedience to his mother that is perhaps surprising and sort of a counter image to the patriarchal view of the Godhead. I mean, the presence of Mary as an intercessor and as a symbol of the love that the Godhead has for us is so strong and so beautiful. I mean, when you asked me, what do we lose? It was hard for me to answer because I've always had it. And I don't know, how to pull out what part Mary plays in my understanding of the Godhead necessarily. But this whole sense of the Trinity as being three people in one, it's this, they're not separate. They are separate, but they can't be separated from one another. Yeah. They're always in this dance of relationship. And I think that emphasis with Mary is there, representing a certain expression of the love that pours out of the Trinity for us. And so she's just someone, it's really hard to pray to an energy or to have to imitate, an energy, which is why God entered into the world in a form a human form that we could imitate. Mm-hmm. And Mary is just another expression of that, of having a form to the love that we can see and emulate and imitate and try and live into. So I guess, I don't know,
No, I love it. And
a little bit.
Jesus experienced all of humanity, and Mary experienced all of being a human as well. And she experienced all of motherhood, including a child who runs off into the temple and gets lost as he's off teaching all the rabbis. And they're off 3 days going back home, and she freaks out because where is her 12-year-old son?
Right.
Right? I mean, what mother or father would freak out about their son who is off showing off to the old rabbis, right?
My little girl dashed out of the sanctuary last week to grab a donut, and I was calling her name in a panic because I couldn't catch her, and she was just, she could just easily maneuver between the grown-ups without anyone really seeing. She's not at eye level, so relate to that sort of sense of panic when you become a parent.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And also just the idea of Jesus's radical love getting him into trouble. It's easier, I think, for many of us to imagine getting into trouble ourselves, but to imagine our children getting into trouble when we feel so programmed to protect them. Mary gives us a connection to what that feels like, and it helps us to consider that.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, she's there when her son is at the cross. I mean, think of the heartbreaking aspect of that. And when she finds out that she's pregnant with Jesus, she's told that a sword will pierce her heart. This is what happens, right? When the spear pierces Jesus, that's when the sword must pierce her heart as a mother, and the profound sense of loss that she felt when Jesus died must have been horrific. So yeah, I'm so glad that we went right into religion and theology right away. Well done, Locke. Nice. That's all.
Yes. You asked me, Adam. You asked.
I know, and I should have known where this was going to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into actual Mother's Day and the founding or the origins of Mother's Day. And Lindsay, I know you've done some research into this because, and I want to talk about this because it's just fascinating. Because right now, Mother's Day has become kind of this sentimental celebration of our mothers, which is a great thing. I mean, everybody should celebrate their mothers, right? But it has an origins that has an edge to it, has a social justice, non-violent protest of war edge to it.
Right, absolutely. I've just known about the Mother's Day Proclamation by Julia Ward Howe for a long time. I did a little more studying, and Julia Ward Howe was the author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was an abolition song. And I think she would be, I think she was distressed to see that it was used not just for abolition, but for, it became a military, the military theme song. When she saw the horrors of war, she just, decided that she had to do everything she could to make those horrors cease and to transform them into peace. She herself was inspired by Anne Jarvis, who worked to provide sanitation during the Civil War so that the soldiers and so that everyone would stop dying so that they could be healthier. And so I feel kind of a little bit self-righteous, not really, but like I feel like I'm in the right when I think of Mother's Day as an anti-war movement because I'm a pacifist. But then when I think of the sanitation origins, I think, man, my house is a mess. So it's like, so I was feeling good until I read but of course, sanitation was very important. And I think that Anne Jarvis wanted to heal. She wanted to heal. She wanted to make things better. And I don't think it was about what side you were on. I think she was also just repulsed by the carnage and the blood and the death. And, there were some good ends to the Civil War, but as Adam has recently written, if those ends could have been achieved without violence, they probably would have been better. So I printed out the actual Mother's Day Proclamation, and I think I'll just read it. It's not very long.
Okay.
I think everyone should hear Julia Ward Howe's proclamation on Mother's Day. So she says, "Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us, reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons and daughters now shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, 'Disarm, disarm. The sword is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate confession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each learning after his own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a general congress of women without limit of nationality be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interest of peace.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
And so relevant in all times. And
So this is Julia Ward Howe's Mother's Day proclamation. This is where Mother's Day really gets footing in our culture, but it doesn't become a national holiday for many more decades. But this is where it starts off as a call for peace, a call for nonviolence. And what is it about, specifically about mothers? This is Julia Ward Howe. This is Anne Jarvis. You typically don't see fathers making these kinds of calls. What do you think it is about mothers that make these kinds of calls for peace?
I mean, I think fathers are certainly just as loving. I think because men directly participated in it, I mean, you're right. I mean, women did too in ways. I mean, many women would cheer on their husbands and sons, but men were really the ones fighting in war, and perhaps to do that, we have to. I mean, I'm speaking as a pacifist here. Some people are not pacifists. Some people disagree with me, but I think you have to keep yourself to see the glory in war. And if you're out there on the battle lines, you probably really have to do that in order to keep going. So it probably took a woman's voice set apart from the actual battle, but certainly not set apart from the devastation, and not set apart from the death either. I mean, women, of course, died, and not set apart from the grief, but set apart from the horror of taking another life. So there's something crying out from our hearts and souls to each other, to continue to protect all children and to recognize all children as needing that same protection and love and care, and not wanting to see our children turn into killing machines.
Suzanne, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was struck by the line of that, war doesn't restore honor. And because that really echoed. What year was that again, Lindsay? What year was this?
1870 is when she wrote this proclamation.
1870. Okay. Wow, that's so soon after the Civil War, and it resonates with the research I've been doing on Maria Montessori and her involvement in the peace movement, and this question of honor is a very big one, and it's a very mimetic one, because honor is what other people think of me. Honor is my reputation. Honor is who I am in the community and my standing in the community. And masculine, male identity has always been tied up with an honor code that is connected with physical strength and prowess and domination. So Montessori wrote a lot about vendetta and dueling and revenge killings, which were still unfortunately going on. She was born in 1870, actually, and was part of the peace movement and workers' rights movements that were in the late 19th century, part of the socialism movements as well. She would probably have identified, if you pressed her, as a socialist, because that was the peace movement of the day, if you will. That was the liberation movement of the day, though we have a very different association with it. But I think the question of why women could make a call like this and men couldn't, I think it's because women can stand outside this honor code and see it more clearly, where the men are engaged in it, and it makes perfect sense. When you're in, it's a very mimetic analysis, but when you're inside a system like that, its logic is self-supporting. And it's only those who stand outside that can see that there's, like, at the basis of it, there's a big flaw in your reasoning. But when you're in it, you can't see it. And I think that's where the women's movement was really a powerful corrective, a voice that was challenging this, way of constructing our reputation and our identity for men. I mean, men still have this problem. What does it mean to be a man in today's world? Is I don't think a settled issue, nor is it for women. What does it mean to be a woman? We're struggling with the ways in which we can form our identities in ways that aren't destructive, rivalrous, and depend upon excluding other people.
As you were talking, Suzanne, I was reminded of a question that I have on a CD or an MP3. CDs are old.
Yeah, right.
From questions posed to René Girard, who's the founder of, the father or the founder or whatever of mimetic theory. And they said, why, since this all goes back to Jesus, why was it that women were primarily the only ones who were at the cross? And he reflected for a minute, thought about it, and he said, well, I think it's probably because women stood outside of the sacrificial system so much more than the men did.
Mm-hmm.
So just as you were saying, like, men are caught up in this honor, shame, violence, dominance kind of system, the sacrificial system. I was reminded of Girard when he says this. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. And the Greek tragedies, of course, I was, lucky to live in the Chicago area and be able to see some incredible theater. But a year or so ago, I saw a performance of a play called Iphigenia at Aulis, in which the father is, oh boy, now I'm going to get it's Agamemnon, I think. He's in charge of getting the wind to start blowing so the ships can sail and go to Troy and kill people. And the gods tell him that a sacrifice is required. It needs to be his daughter. And the drama of how he has to trick his wife into bringing their daughter to the port, to Aulis, and the pathos, the mother, when she finds out that her daughter's going to be sacrificed, her defense of her child, and this play puts this sort of issue of honor and war and the sacrifice of children in the name of honor and violence right up there. And this was, pre-Jesus. This is pre the Christian revelation. But this problem of how we sacrifice our children for the sake of honor is an ancient one, and we're still working on that one.
Wow. Yeah. Before we move on from the origins of Mother's Day, I was doing some research too, and we've been talking about Anne Jarvis, right? And what was really interesting about Anne Jarvis was she was a nurse during the Civil War for the North, but she would go to soldiers on either side and try to bring them back to health. I mean, this is a radical move of nurturing and caring for friend and foe. It blurs the line between good guys and bad guys. All that matters to Anne Jarvis during this time is just healing people, which seems to be a main thrust that she had during her life.
Mm-hmm. And we would call that treasonous, of course.
Right.
And that's like giving aid and comfort to the enemy is treason. And I can understand when that aid and comfort is like secrets about where troops are hiding so that they can go kill them. But when it's actual aid and comfort, when what you're doing is helping to save the life of another human being, that should be celebrated, and that should be our highest value. We still as a society don't, we honor people who do that. We honor people who do things like that, but when we're in the thick of it ourselves, we're blinded by. And Anna Jarvis was Anne Jarvis's daughter, and she worked hard to get Mother's Day really nationally recognized. She celebrated her own in 1908, but the first formal declaration of Mother's Day was, Woodrow Wilson, who was, of course, a wartime president, declared it at the beginning of World War I. 1914 was the first real Mother's Day, and I can't help but feel like a lot of the message was co-opted and, defanged in a sense. Like, mothers aren't just sentimental, they're fierce. We are a force for a love that's more powerful than the irrelevant agencies. I don't think of government in general that way, but when it sacrifices our children to kill another land's children, then I don't think very highly of the military-industrial complex. And I can't help but feel like maybe the original Mother's Day was kind of co-opted.
Well, Anna Jarvis, who spent so much time trying to get Mother's Day as a celebration not just of mothers, but of her particular mother, who did all of these radical acts during the Civil War, and even after the Civil War, she did something else that would be seen as treasonous, might be seen as treasonous. She held meetings where you would have soldiers from the North and the South. This is after the war. And she would dress up as a soldier from the South in gray uniform, and another mother would be there who would be dressed in blue uniform as the North. And they would start talking to each other and model in front of these soldiers how to reintegrate themselves into relationships. And then at the end, they would, so they'd have a conversation, they would shake hands, they would give each other a hug, and then they would invite members in the audience, former soldiers from the North and the South, to kind of mimic what they were doing. And this was this radical attempt to bring about some kind of reconciliation, some kind of healing in their lives. And this is what her daughter, Anna Jarvis, was trying to get at with Mother's Day. And I was reading by the end of her life, when she died maybe in 1950s or something, she regretted that she made Mother's Day, or that she fought so hard for Mother's Day. She was depressed about Mother's Day because, as Lindsay, you say, it was co-opted by Hallmark. Hey, yeah, let's just celebrate Mother's Day, and not as a protest against war. So, yeah, it's fascinating history of Mother's Day. So, let's get into more mimesis and mothers and babies. There's Lindsay, you were talking about it earlier when the relationship between mothers and their unborn children when they're pregnant, and how children depend on mothers for everything while they're in the womb. And after they're born, they also depend on babies also depend on mothers, right, in order to become more human, ways that they share with one another. Do either of you have reflections on that?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's no more intense relationship than the mother's body and totally wrapped around the forming child. I mean, that is something that men don't have the benefit of experience in, and it's something that, I don't want to talk about too much, Adam, because you can never have that experience, but it's like, it's fabulous. You're sick half of the time, and you're swollen and you can't reach anything, and but at the same time there's such a joy connected with it, and such a profound experience of life's mystery, that it's just it's an experience that I'm just so grateful to have had. And I think it makes for a very profound relationship when that baby comes out into the world. Of course, it's imprinted already with the sound of the mother's voice, and the scent of the body, and the feel of the presence of the mother. I mean, they may be outside the body when they're first born, but they're still very much one with the mother. But it's the beginning of the separation. We're not born with a fully formed body, or a fully formed identity, or a fully formed mind. All of that develops in relationship. And the very earliest, most intense one is with the mother, just by virtue of the fact that they shared a body together. I mean, it's just sort of a fact. You can't deny that. But the role of the father, the presence of the father, or I'm saying mother and father. Of course, many children are taken from the mother, the physical mother, and raised by another mother, another embodiment of mother, and that bond can be formed just as well, as the one that comes out of the body. It's just easy, it's just nature makes it quite easy for us. But we can get around nature that way. And anyone can perform that function of being the primary presence in the life of the child, in this newborn baby. But there also needs to be a third presence, so that the baby slowly becomes aware that they aren't the same as the mother. They're not one being. They're separate beings. And that third presence, that different voice that calls the child's attention, begins to let the child see that there's boundaries between me and mother, and this because there's another presence that's not part of that dyad. There's a triad, and so, oh my gosh, the community, humans are born for relationship and community, and it's right there in the way we're formed. We depend upon the presence of others immediately and at the foundation of our formation. And so all of these parts, it's one of the things I love about the image of the Trinity is separate but intertwined. And it's the same the way I think for fathers, mothers, men, women, whatever, we keep trying to separate roles, or we compete with each other to say who's better at what, or you can't deny me this, or whatever. No, it's not about that. It's about this intimate sharing. And it doesn't quite matter who's doing what when, as long as we're in relationship with one another. And we don't get stuck into rivalrous patterns. And when we get stuck, then the sharing stops, But anyway, well, that went far down the road.
Yeah.
Your original question. Okay, whatever.
No, it's fantastic.
That was brilliant.
Yeah. Speaking of power struggles and rivalry, Suzanne, you mentioned Maria Montessori earlier, and I would love to hear more about Maria Montessori. And you saw resonance with Maria Montessori's work and the origins of Mother's Day when we were talking about that a little bit ago, and I see more resonance there too, because Anne Jarvis also wanted to celebrate the role of mothers, not just in the family, but in society as a whole. And in education, yes, and all of these things. I think Maria Montessori was on the exact same page there. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, I would say so, yeah. I guess let's say two things about that. Montessori was a single working mom. Okay, so she was a medical doctor and a peace activist and a women's rights activist, internationally known. And she was very active in all of this. So one way she was involved with early childhood and women was in helping working women be able to work and be at ease that their children were taken care of. So she's known for this early childhood education program that she developed for preschool age children. And that emerged because in Rome at the time, this is in 1907, there was there was a big movement of people from the countryside into the cities. Peasants were being disrupted because there was all kinds of economic disruption going on, and people were coming into the city looking for work, and tenements were going up, and the housing situation was difficult. And so she was part of this little group that was trying to provide decent housing for the poor. And so this one real estate developer, had set up these, he redid some beautiful tenement buildings. And the young children, the 3 to 6 year olds, the one who were too young for school, were being left unattended when their moms went to work, and their dads, of course, and they were defacing the buildings. Running up and down and, uprooting the new plantings and writing on the walls, what little kids will do. And so this fellow, Signor Talamo, came to Dr. Montessori because she was well known for her education programs for mentally deficient children at that time. And he said, "Can you help me?" And she's like, okay. So she set up a room in one of these tenement buildings for 50 3 to 6 year olds, just to get them in a safe place so that their moms especially wouldn't worry about them when they were at work. And that developed into this education method, but it was also a social program for Maria. She saw this as a service to the working mom, and that the school should be in the building. The teacher should live in the building. There should be a strong relationship between the parents and the teacher. And everyone was working together to care for the children. It wasn't like parents were abandoning their responsibility or teachers were pretending they didn't also have a parental role with the children. So it was a really powerful reform movement, and she was just really, really excited by it. And a little bit like Mother's Day getting, whittled down to a almost meaningless snub. Her programs right now, her schools are often not part of any social reform movement at all, and often only accessible to wealthy people. So it's sad. I think she would be a little disappointed by that. But certainly she was part of that spirit of those times where education reform was going on strong, and so was this hope for a new humanity. I mean, she felt she had discovered something true about human nature and human development that would allow the emergence of a new type of human being who was not so easily subjected or susceptible to rivalries and insults to honor, and so quick to be violent. And she saw that some of these adult behaviors that we see as very negative had their roots in the way development had been stifled and misdirected from early childhood. She thought if you didn't interfere with normal human development, you would get a naturally peaceful, calm human being, an adult. But if you interfere with it, you're going to get problems. So, this is the time of early psychology is being discovered, Freud and Adler and all those people. And she was certainly part of those exciting early discoveries of of human development and early childhood development.
Can you give an example of ways that we stifle that development? Like when we see children fighting over the same toy. This is the mimetic theory example, right? So one child wants a toy, one child's playing with a toy, another child comes over and they start fighting over the toy. This is a typical rivalry that we see amongst children. What's the role of the adult in that kind of power struggle for Maria Montessori?
Well, for her to, so I do a lot of the intersection of Montessori and mimetic theory. So I may use some language she never would have used, but I think it certainly describes her thinking. She was ahead of René. So René was born in, I think, what year was he born?
1923.
1923.
Yeah.
And I often say that their birth dates are reversed because her program looks like a practical application of his theory to early childhood education, but the theory wasn't around yet. So in what you see in that kind of behavior when children are fighting over the same toy is what you see in power struggles too. It's just mimesis, it's imitation. So children are learning what to desire by seeing someone else desire it. That's how desire works, as right. We know from mimetic theory. Desire doesn't arise spontaneously within us, nor are objects inherently valuable. They become valuable by virtue of someone desiring them, and then we imitate that desire. So children are hyper-mimetic machines. In fact, they're just think of them as just raw mimeticism. Montessori called it the absorbent mind. They're simply absorbing everything in their environment, everything. And what Girard discovered especially was that what we're doing is absorbing desires. From the minute we can become conscious of other people's desires, we're learning to desires, which is why we can become fully functioning adults in different cultures. All our desires are not attached to objects or aims or anything, but they have to be formed by the unique circumstances in which we're born. So when parents see children imitating desires for objects and getting into conflicts, or they find their children find themselves in conflict with their own children, I think it's very important to recognize this. It's not willfully bad behavior. Children aren't bad. They're mimetic. They're just hyper-mimetic. And so all judgment needs to be put aside, and also any feeling that you're being insulted or your honor is being insulted by your child misbehaving has absolutely nothing to do with you. It's simply a child being a child and going about its business of taking in the world and incorporating it into themselves. We can talk about strategies that Montessori offered, but I think one thing before we do that, just to look at another aspect of power struggles that confound parents is if they're imitating me and I say, no, you can't do that. Why don't they imitate my no, you can't do that? Why do they do the opposite? And it's because you have to remember, what are they imitating? Your desires, right? So what we learn, what your desire learns is that the things that are most desirable to someone else are the things that they don't want you to touch, that they forbid you to touch, right? So if your child, a child reaches for your favorite cup, and you're afraid they're going to break it, what's your instant response is, no, don't touch it. And as soon as you say, no, don't touch it, the child gets the message, ooh, that's the thing you really love. And they want to love it too. So they will reach for it. They won't be refused because their whole person is geared towards imitating your desires. So you have to be very careful when you say no, because when you say no, you're signaling the thing that's really important to you. And often the thing that's really important to you is to be the one that says no. And so if you really value a position of authority, of being the boss, of being respected and so forth, your child is going to catch hold of that, and they're going to want to be the one that says no. In fact, my 1.5-year-old granddaughter right now has added no to her vocabulary, and she doesn't quite know what it means, but she knows no is an important word, right? And she knows it's something children want more than anything to be like us. They can't, it's their desire. They're trying to become adults. And so any signal we give to them that designates something valuable that we would rather they didn't orient themselves towards, we have to be smarter than they are. We have to redirect the way we're behaving and the signals that we're giving to our children, instead of just saying that they're disobedient or disrespectful or something. Don't let your egos get involved. It's not going to be helpful.
That is the problem, Suzanne. I am just not smarter than a 3-year-old. So
yeah,
that's the issue.
Well, they are really, really smart. So to be smarter than a 3-year-old is exhausting. It is exhausting. Yes. I just remember at the end of a day of parenting, it's like you ran a marathon. I mean, you can't let your attention, you have to be incredibly focused. Your attention has to be there. You have to be totally engaged with your child and knowing that you're giving clues and cues all the time to them. You just need to be fully as conscious as you can be of what you're doing.
Well,
no pressure.
You saying that. No, I appreciate you saying that because it's often towards the end of the day when I have my worst parenting moments. And it's because I feel like I've been running a marathon just to get through the day, and knowing that is typical, is normal, allows me to forgive myself for it at times. So thank you.
Oh, that's great. And that's why if you're lucky enough to have 2 adults in the house, at those moments, that's what we always were taught in our teacher training for Montessori is kids are going to trigger you at different things are going to trigger your anger or your frustration or something. And we were taught, when you feel that feeling, that emotion, immediately walk away and let your co-teacher handle it. Because the co-teacher is not hooked, right? And it's the same with parenting. If you're lucky enough to have another adult around and you feel yourself getting hooked, no good is going to come of it. Just walk away and let the other parent, and don't be upset if the other parent then doesn't do it the way you would have done it, because the way you would have done it is probably not healthy. So let the other adult come in and handle that situation, and you two can talk about it later. But yeah, getting hooked by your kids is terrible.
Well, my worst parenting moments often come in the middle of the day when my co-teacher isn't with me. So,
yes, I know.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's hard.
One last quote, this is a quote, maybe it's a paraphrase, from Maria Montessori that I would like to hear both of you reflect on, maybe just a little bit, is this: a society's peace depends on how it treats its children.
Oh, yeah. Did Maria say that, or did I just spout that? I think I just spouted that the other day. But she would have agreed with that completely, and so would, let's bring it full circle, Jesus.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're the most vulnerable, and they're the future, so you've got both of those things going. And they're learning from us, and they're learning from each other, but the peers that they're learning from are also learning from us. So we have to create the world in which they know their values, so they can be confident but also humble. And it's a monumental task, I guess.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts on that, Suzanne?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that is, when this is something Montessori referred to often, is that I forget which gospel it's in, of course, but when Jesus says, when oh gosh, I forget the story, but it was something like people ask, well, when did we see you? When did we take care of you, or whatever? Do you remember it?
Yeah, Matthew. That's Matthew 25, when the nations come to the king, and the king divides the sheep from the goats.
Right. It says you didn't
take care of me. You didn't visit me when I was in prison. You didn't give me water when I was thirsty, or feed me when I was hungry. And those are the sheep. No, those are the goats who didn't do that.
Yeah.
The sheep did come to Jesus when he was at his greatest need. So they go on.
Well, that's what. Yeah. Well, they say, well, when did we not minister to you? And he says, well, when you ministered to the poor, to the people in prison, to the hungry, that's when you ministered to me. And right. Montessori took that parable and extended it and said, and also, when you minister to children, you're ministering to me. For her, she saw clearly that with each child, God was incarnating again. Every child is an incarnation of the divine spirit. And when we fail to provide for the needs of children, we're failing. We're failing to see the presence of Christ in our midst. And so that's why she would say that we are judged by our cultures, our societies will be judged by how we minister to the children. And as Lindsay says, they're the most vulnerable and needy. And also, oh, God bless them, the most trusting and open and forgiving presence in our midst, which is why we need them. They need us, but we need them, because they love with an openness and a non-judgmental spirit that is unfortunately not easily found among adults. But they remind us. They remind us of our best selves.
Since becoming a mother myself and seeing the trust of my children, I have a deeper respect for all that my mother did. And, I mean, she still works full time, and we managed to keep it all together. She would work long hours and come home and dinner wasn't made, and she would make dinner. You know, it wouldn't be it was good. It wouldn't be very elaborate, but she would do this after a 9 or 10 hour day. And she was the one who, he and Dad both checked homework, but, you know, if I was going to keep someone up at night helping me, it was Mom. And it was just so much work. I mean, I couldn't possibly appreciate how much work it was until now, but thank you, Mom.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very beautiful. Suzanne, do you want to say anything about your mom?
Oh, my mom taught me my love language, which is food.
Oh, nice.
Food. Yes. Yes, indeed. My mom is an amazing cook, and if she loves you, you know it.
Yeah. That's good.
And
awesome.
then you won't eat for days, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, sadly, one of the things about Mother's Day that's hard for many people is that not everybody has their mom around. And my mom died from cancer in the year 2000. So this is my 17th year without my mom, I guess. So it's always kind of a bittersweet day. And as a pastor, I try to keep that in mind, and also that not everybody has a good relationship with their mother either. So when they are alive. So Mother's Day is a great holiday, but also very difficult for many people. But I am grateful for the women who have mothered me, and I'm sure my mom would be grateful for the women who have mothered me too. And both of you have been excellent examples of mothers in my life, and even some men have mothered me along the way. So I am grateful for all of that. So. And thank you to everyone who has joined this conversation live. You can stay up to date on the Ravencast by joining the Ravencast group page on Facebook. You can also like the Raven Foundation Facebook page. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video and share it with whoever you think might be interested. If you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review over there. It would really help us out. And if you are interested, please go over to the Raven Review at ravenfoundation.org and subscribe. And that way, it'll be sure to keep you up to date on articles and interviews like this one. Thank you, Lindsay and Suzanne. Thank you both for being with us and talking through the importance of mothers with me today on this very special day that we celebrate Mother's Day, this Sunday. So, thank you very much. And until next time, grace and peace be with you, my friends. Bye-bye.